really, really excited to share this information with you. A little deeper dive into things like, what does the GHK-Copper peptide do? How can you focus on that, get someone's interest? What are some of the hiccups that would prevent people from responding to the patches, to the X39, optimally and fully? And some things that are going on in people where they're, not getting the best experience yet. We'll talk about some of those things. Call your team, tell them to get on. It'll be worth their while. I hope to make this an hour of education, learning, getting a deeper conviction and a deeper understanding of what we truly have in this X39. Peter asked me, he said, hey, I want you to tell your story and help other healthcare providers understand why it is that you got involved with LifeWave. What made you open to even looking at LifeWave? And I said, okay, well, I'm going to tell the full story. I haven't told, most of you have not heard the whole story that got me to where I am right now, because we talk about, I'm a chiropractor, but I don't do chiropractic anymore. I've told bits and pieces of it previously, but I'm going to tell you the whole story today. It's an interesting circuitous route for me to get to where I am right now. Okay, so I embarked on that journey. I was a chiropractor for 22 years, and some things happened, and a series of events changed what my vision was, how I was going to retire eventually. And here's what I want to tell the healthcare providers on this call. No matter what your ideas are about what your retirement will look like, there's a high probability that it won't look like that. And you ought to prepare. You ought to have something that is not what you, and I'm not knocking healthcare at all, but when you're a healthcare provider, your income is mostly dependent upon your presence somewhere. If something happens and you can't be present, this is what you need to prepare for. Once I'm finished telling you what went down to shift me off my course, I hope it shakes some of you to the core and helps you realize, I'm a little bit vulnerable in this position. So I'm going to do a little bit of a screen share. Let's make sure that I can do that. I have not a lot of slides. I just have a few. Okay, there we go. So those of you who haven't met me yet, I met a lot of people in Florida. Dr. Jon Harmon, chiropractic physician for 33 years. I'm board certified in QEEG and neurofeedback. That means electrical. You're looking at the electrical activity in the brain. There's a certain range that's normal. When the brain gets too much or too little of electrical activity somewhere, you get a symptom. So when it gets out of balance, we get symptoms. When it's in balance, symptoms don't live there. And that's what that whole certification is. It was interesting, about 4 or 5 years ago, St. Alphonsus Hospital, they didn't even have someone board certified in QEEG. So I was the one who taught their class to their social workers about QEEG. Father of 8, and I used to say 24, but now it's 26. We have 26 grandkids. We're very prolific. Founder and owner of Clearmind, Idaho, located in Meridian, Idaho. That's right next door to Boise. It used to be quite a few miles between the cities, but now you can't tell when you're crossing the border. I'm an advisory board member for IASYS Technology, and that's a cutting-edge developer of microcurrent neurofeedback units. They are the company that makes the unit we have in my office that untrains the primitive brain from the faulty pattern that it's stuck in. The study was paid for and co-sponsored by the VA at San Diego State. I am the developer of treatment protocols involving microcurrent neurofeedback, cold laser therapy, and autonomic nervous system balancing. That's what we do in my practice. Author of the book called How to Reverse Aging, a comprehensive guide to copper peptides. We help people get their brains right at Clear Mind, Idaho, and our motto is, it's not a life sentence. That anxiety, that whatever you have, it's not a life sentence, and it can be fixed. Here is the cover of the book. It was released August 28th. I got really frustrated in the first few years of LifeWave because I wanted everybody to understand what GHK-Copper peptide does, and I prepared 3 different PowerPoint presentations and looked at all the research so that everybody else didn't have to do it. And then so I finally decided I'm going to put it all into one resource, and that's what the book is about. This is the table of contents. You can see that the GHK-Copper peptide pretty much affects all of our organ system. And that was the astounding thing about when I was doing the research, is how many of our organs and systems this peptide affects. From the brain, we're going to go over a little bit about that, the brain to the microcirculation and everything in between. And I hope you get a better understanding about that. I hope to spark and increase some brain cell activity when we go through this GHK-Copper peptides. But also spark in you healthcare providers a new area of the brain that says, you know what? It's a good thing to have a plan B. This was my 18-year-old niece. Beautiful, talented musician. In March of 2010, she committed suicide. So my cousin, my kid's cousin, killed herself. My youngest sister found her in the closet. She had hanged herself, and nobody understands. You never will. In March of 2011, this is my oldest daughter, her husband, an attorney, was having an affair, and her husband waited in the Walgreens parking lot till they got back from their tryst and shot him once in the head and once in the heart. At that point, my daughter actually had one more child than here. So that was almost exactly 1 year to the day after the suicide in my family. It's been on Dateline twice, American Monster twice, and yet another crime show came here last year from England, and they interviewed us, and it'll be on again. And then I had brought neurofeedback into my practice after 3 or 4 years of counseling, and prescription drugs weren't working for my younger daughters, who then had anxiety, depression, and insomnia. And I went to the dentist to have some dental work done, and he had to use a dental dam. So, and I'm claustrophobic when that happens. So he put me under conscious sedation, and I woke up, and he said, that was so bad I had to do a root canal. And to me, a root canal was like cutting off a foot. He could have said, I had to cut your right foot off. I'm really sorry. And I was really, really upset about that. But a week later, my right wrist puffed up like a football, and I had staph infection in my bones. 50% of the people don't make it when that happens. So a chiropractor and a drummer was faced with not being able to bend my wrist again. So I, after initially felt really, really sorry for myself and did a little sulking, I got to the point where I said, this will not be the end of my story. And so while I was convalescing, that's when I studied to get my board certification in QEEG. And I said, I guess I'm not going to do both like I was chiropractic and neurofeedback. I guess I'm going to be the brain specialist guy. So there's not one thing I do in my practice now that I've done that I did before other than write chart notes. Write them now. We don't write them. The osteomyelitis. So that's my reason why in April of 2020, when my friend asked me what I knew about stem cells, and I said, I had them both in both knees, and they helped a little bit. But when he said, "What if you elevate that by wearing this little Band-Aid thing?" And I said, "I'm in." I want to first talk about the effect the GHK-Copper peptide has on the brain. We're going to start with a couple of slides about EEG coherence. Coherence is a measurement of the synchronization of signals between two sites, like between the frontal lobes, between the temporal lobes, front to back. The coherence is side-to-side measurement of how much crosstalk there is between two lobes, two analogous lobes. And there can either be a normal amount or there can be too much or not enough. So it quantifies the interaction or communication and shared information between sites. Different things happen on the right side than they do on the left. And the QEEG is a measurement of how much of that there is. When we have a normal amount, we have normal activity, normal brain. But when we have things like, when we have just right, it's normal. But when we have too much or too little, then they don't communicate really well. And if we have hypercoherence, that means there's too much crosstalk and everything's all jammed up. It's like rush hour traffic on Eagle Road here in Meridian and Boise, where nothing moves. And the more of that measurement, the more hypercoherent someone has, the more autistic-like they are. That's too much. Hypocoherence is called poor inter-site interaction. It's an indication of diminished cognitive efficiency. So hypocoherence is not enough activity. Like, there's not enough communication between the sides. And so I can't remember stuff. I got cognitive decline. I wanted to talk about specifically what the GHK-Copper peptide, the process of from the beginning, and then cognitive neuroregeneration, regenerating things that have been lost. In the brain, it's all about synapses and neurons. The neurons are the wires, the synapses are the joints, so to speak, the spaces between the neurons, and that's where neurotransmitters will continue that signal from that neuron or not. And it's all about what we call neuroplasticity. When we learn new things, our brain makes more neurons. We lose, everybody on this call, we're losing 9,000 neurons a day because they're old. If you can win the battle of, hey, I know I'm going to lose 9,000 today, what am I going to do to make more? Am I going to learn new things, read a new book, learn how to dance, learn how to play an instrument? This signals our brain to make more neurons because I got to do things better. And the brain makes a substance called brain-derived neurotropic factor. We'll just call it BDNF from now on. BDNF is like telling the work crew to get your butt in gear and make some new neurons. Hey, he's done this every day for at least 45 seconds. We ought to build some new neurons so he can do it better. And that's what learning is about, learning how to do a dance. Your brain is constantly tweaking the connections. Hey, if I do it here, she can point her toe a little bit better on that one move. And if you do it here, he can operate the violin better. So there's this constant Cells are dying, cells are being replaced. He who can win the battle of between the losing neurons and building neurons remembers who he is when he's old and doesn't meet a new person in his house every 15 minutes who happens to be his spouse. So let's relate GHK-Copper peptide to making new neurons, making BDNF that I just talked about, and building new connections and neurotransmitters. GHK-Copper peptide acts like a chaperone, a tour guide. It wraps its arms around the GHK-Copper peptide. Come here, honey, I got to take you through the blood-brain barrier. It actually delivers the GHK-Copper peptide into the brain. The blood-brain barrier is like a sieve, or, used to call it cheesecloth when I was a kid. You're filtering stuff out. It's there so that big bacteria and things can't get in the brain. It's supposed to keep things out that aren't supposed to be there. So the GHK-Copper peptide is really small, and it takes that copper into the brain so that the brain can have copper. Why would the brain want to have copper? Isn't copper toxic in the brain? Some people say copper is toxic in the brain. I want to differentiate between that type of copper and the copper that's attached to the peptide, because it's no longer free copper. GHK-Copper peptide holds on to the copper. Your brain has to have that in order to make more BDNF. What is that? That's the stuff that calls out the work crew. Make more neurons and more connections. Come on, get to work. So you have to have BDNF in order to do that. The GHK-Copper peptide is part of that process. It's also part of the process to build new neurons, new connections, neuropeptides. So how important is copper for the brain? It's all important. So if we either don't have enough, I don't have any proof of this yet, but it makes sense to me. If you don't have enough GHK-Copper peptide, you're going to have more free copper because it's not attached to the copper peptide. And the GHK holds on to it till it's needed, and then here's your copper. Do your thing. So this is why. Oh, the other thing, it helps with the clearing of the gunk that builds up during the day when we're using our brain. So you look at the GHK-Copper peptide, well, that helps us understand how it could be beneficial for neuroregeneration. It can be beneficial for cognitive function because we win the battle between building new neurons and losing old neurons. And the average person, like I said, loses 9,000 a day, but and I've heard different figures, but I'm going to go with about 4,500, 35 to 4,500. We only build that many more unless we're doing new things. So there's your incentive to stay brain active as we age. Excuse me. So those are the key things that you need to know about the copper peptide affecting the brain. Excuse me. Let's talk about another top killer, cardiovascular disease. So early on in my LifeWave career, I was oddly attracted to the organ function study, and that's what you'll find it listed in your back office. It was an organ function study. It wasn't a cardiovascular study. Part of the organ function study was cardiovascular. Part of the cardiovascular was the results that they got with having people wear the X39 for 6 weeks. They did measurements starting 3 weeks and then 6 weeks. And what they found is that after 6 weeks of wearing the patch, the cardiovascular system acted, it's another safe way of saying reverse age, but acted 2 months younger. By the way, we forgot to do the disclaimer, so I'm going to do that. So I'm Even though I'm a doctor, I'm not your doctor, and I'm not making any recommendations. I'm not making any treatment protocols. I'm not diagnosing anything. And the topic we're talking about is not intended to treat or cure any diseases. If you have diseases or disorders, you should seek care with your healthcare provider, before you start anything new or make any decisions about anything you're being treated for or will be treated for. So, having said that, that study showed that the cardiovascular system acted 2 months younger. And I talked about that early on when we would do the patching podcast. Little did I know that that was going to play out for me over a period of about a total of 2 years. Long story, I had a knee replacement surgery coming up. I was a crazy skier, tore my cartilage and broke my leg in 1973, set me on a bad course, bone on bone. But right prior to my knee replacement in August of 2020, I started using X39 in April of 2020. So about 4.5 months later, I started having these weird feelings in my chest where my heart was. And I knew I had PVCs, preventricular contractions, for many years. I noticed it when I was like in junior high. I could tell if something was kind of odd. I didn't know what it was, what it was called. But I found out later they were called PVCs, preventricular contractions. But they got really, really weird at about 4.5 months in using X39. And I got the surgery coming up. I gotta go see the cardiologist and find out what's going on. This is really weird because it went to every 5th beat, day and night, every 5th beat. It would stop for a second and then start and then start and then stop. And then, so I was waking up in the night like I had sleep apnea, taking a deep breath. So I made an appointment with the cardiologist, did a stress echo. He comes in after the test. He said, your heart responded well to exercise. But you just have these PVCs on a right bundle branch block. And that's the first I ever knew that I had one. And that was 4.5 months in. And I said, what causes that? He said, well, we have these apoptotic cells in our whole body. The heart is no different. You just can't replace them fast enough because it's beating. And the light went on. And I said, I've increased my stem cells for 4.5 months. I think it's being repaired. They're new. They don't know how to do it. They're beating all at the same time and they're skipping a beat. That was my theory. Proof of that. That's just what it felt like. 2 weeks later, those were gone.
Wait for her.
A year and a half later, I had another stress echo done, and the report came back and said, right bundle branch block no longer present. Look up RBBB, or right bundle branch block, and you will see that all-cause mortality goes up if you have a right bundle branch block. So to not be plagued with that for the rest of my life, my wife, my kids, my grandkids are ecstatic because I'm going to be around longer. But here's the point of having told me this. Had I not had that test done, I never would have known I either had a right bundle branch block or that it had gone away. So when you start using the patches and you don't feel anything for a couple of months, I never would have felt it. It just would have gone away, and I never would have known, A, that I had it, and then it went away. So measure something. If you're starting to use the X39, or the people that you share them with are starting to use the X39, they say, well, I'm going to use them for a couple of months and see what they do for me. Always follow right after that with this question. Great. What are you going to be measuring? Silence. Let them answer. What are you going to be measuring? Because if you don't have something that's noticeable and you're not measuring anything, how are you going to know? And so I tell people, they say, well, I want, my right knee pain. Oh, gosh, I thought you were going to be doing things like liver function tests and kidney filtration and blood pressure and blood chemistry. You're talking about a subjective complaint like knee pain. Okay, just know that the elevation of your stem cells, you can't direct where they go. So be patient. Eventually, it might get to it. It might get to it tomorrow. And you just don't know when that's going to happen. So that's a little bit of a way that I've explained it. before I go on to another topic, I want to talk about things that can impede or prevent someone from responding the best to increasing their GHK. By the way, in the blood, that peptide exists in two forms. There's GHK-Copper peptide, and then there's GHK peptide. Once the copper is gone, donated to building a neuron, it's now GHK, and you have both forms in the bloodstream. So if you ever see that written, that's what that's about. It flips back and forth, GHK, GHK. Same thing is true with glutathione transferase, different forms, without going into detail. If you're going to make GHK copper peptide, you have to have copper. Copper, you get copper from green leafy vegetables, nuts and seeds, seafood, organ meats, or if you want to cover all your bases and make sure you're getting enough, take 15 to 30 drops of chlorophyll every day because it's a rich source of copper. And so if you're not getting enough copper and you're trying to make copper peptide, there might be a stoppage in the workforce, in the work line, in the assembly line. And one also has to have amino acids, which come from what? Protein. Those are the building blocks of protein. And what happens when people age is they kind of lose their appetite, and if they're at home alone and man, I got to make dinner and it takes too long to cook something with protein in it. And so I'm just going to grab a carbohydrate snack. But what happens is they don't have a good source of protein. You have to have amino acids to build neurotransmitters. You have to have amino acids to build the GHK copper peptide. So it would be good for especially people, they might not have the best diet, have them take amino acids. You can get a lot of different manufacturers, but just get it where all it has in it is amino acids, and they're compressed into little capsules. You can get some. Supplement with amino acids. Supplement with GHK copper or with copper. But chlorophyll is a good source. What are some of the other reasons someone would not respond to the patches or feel like they're not responding that well? If somebody tells you that, ask them if they wake up refreshed in the morning. If they tell you no, they may have sleep apnea. They won't feel good no matter what you do. They're not renewing, refreshing, and cleansing and detoxing their brain at night. It happens during certain phases of sleep, and if they don't go through that phase, those proteins that are a result of metabolism in the brain start to build up, and that's what causes Alzheimer's and dementia as we age. Your body shrinks your brain down to 60% of its normal size and then flushes it with cerebral spinal fluid at night during a certain sleep phase. If it's not doing that, they're building up. Cognitive decline, cognitive issues. But if you're not sleeping at night, that person is going to feel ill because they're tired all the time. And at the drop of a hat, they'll fall asleep. So have them go find out if they have sleep apnea. The other really common thing I've found, and we all have them, is parasites. Somebody will want they want to use the patches specifically in their head. They want it to help their tingling in their feet and hands, their paresthesias, their neuropathy. Parasites poop ammonia that damages the nerve endings. You could have parasites and you could have chronic problems that you're hoping and wishing that the patches would help. But you get rid of those parasites and your immune system's already weak. And yes, elevating your stem cells can help your immune system, but if it starts way down here and it comes up, it's still not enough to render the final blow. And sometimes even a healthy immune system can't get rid of those parasites, and we need outside help. I don't do that. I know doctors who do. They do remote consultations. If you think you have parasites, and I'm going to tell you, they can live in your tear ducts, they can live in your eyes, they can live in your liver, they can live in anywhere in the body. And when I see people French kissing their dog, I go, oh dear. You just got parasites. Just know that we all have them. Get rid of them. Help people get rid of that, and then you'll watch them really start to respond to the patches. Okay, so timing we have good. All right. Next category. Let's talk about athletic performance. When you go to a bodybuilding contest, one of the things they're judging someone on is their vascularity, isn't it? Look at the veins, they're huge, they're all built and buff, and they have huge muscles. They have big arteries and veins that take raw materials in and out and waste products out. It's the GHK-Copper peptide that starts that process. And here's the connection. We work out, he who can win the battle between energy production and then processing and dealing with the damage you caused when you worked out wins the battle. I'll never forget, I was a news watcher when I was in junior high, and I was watching the news, and I heard a news report say that you damage your body when you work out. And I thought, wow, that's weird. I thought working out was all good. But initially, it causes a lot of oxidative stress. And that part of that is signaling your body to build stronger ligaments and bigger muscles that can do the work you're asking it to do. When we work out and we feel that burn or cramping feel, that's a deprivation of oxygen. That signals your body to make a substance that tells GHK to chemo-attract, attracting capillary growth into that muscle that you're trying to build. Because the deprivation of oxygen is what signals your body to do that. It's the GHK-Copper peptide that initiates that after being signaled by that substance that is responding as a result of the deprivation of oxygen. So chemo attracts capillaries and smooth muscle, the little tiny smooth muscles around vessels that can increase or decrease the opening of the vessels. So you have to have those in order to build proper structures in your capillaries and veins. And they have to be able to change the lumen, the opening of those vessels. So the GHK does that, attracts it in. The GHK-Copper peptide is crucial in the pathway to make ATP or energy. So it increases your ability to make energy to work out. So now you're winning that battle between having enough energy. He who has enough energy or more energy can work out longer and harder. Why do we quit our workout? It's when our body's had enough. We don't have enough. We try to lift the weight. We don't have enough energy for those muscle cells. If you have more energy, you can work out longer, you can work out harder, you can run faster. Excuse me. On the other end of that, it helps process the oxidative stress. We won't go into detail, but let's just say at that point, it processes or accelerates the processing of all of the things that build up and make you sore and make your ligaments sore because you damage them. So now you got a situation, you're making more energy, you're recovering faster, you get in the gym sooner. This is why all these athletes are using this to their advantage. Because, at the beginning of the season, it's he who gets in the best shape. By competition, you win the battle. And it's not that you're 3 seconds faster in the 100-yard sprint. You're 100th of a second faster. But you're able to get in the gym more. That is how the GHK-Copper peptide helps with those workouts that you're doing and helps you. And there's talk. We don't have really elegant studies about building muscle, but there's talk about how it actually helps our body build bigger muscles, because if you think about it, if you can't get the circulation into a muscle, it's not going to grow. And the other aspect of that is collagen. That's the final thing, is that it's the GHK-Copper peptide that helps your body make collagen and repair collagen. So you're damaging the muscle when you're working out. Now you're going to repair it really fast, and you're going to build a bigger muscle, because now you have better vascularization, more oxygen, more raw materials to do the things that you need to do to work out. So that's how the GHK helps with our workouts. Now let's move on to skin and hair. Skin, made of collagen. As we age, our collagen in our skin, our face, particularly, that's where everybody, we're kind of concerned about how we look in our face. That's our signature when we meet people. And I used to tell people when they're coming in for adjustments, I said, you know what? Did you do your exercises? No. Did you wear that sacroiliac joint belt so that your ligaments can heal? No. I said, you know what? If your spine was on your face, you'd take better care of it, wouldn't you? And we kind of joked, yeah, and that's true. Stuff that's on your face, they'll spend $3,000 on PRP, but they have a hard time spending money taking care of their spine. It seems kind of ironic to me. But so skin, if you can build and maintain plump collagen thickness, skin doesn't start to sag and crinkle and wrinkle. So this is why we're seeing these pics, you see these before and after pics on Facebook, and holy cow, there's this woman, 7 months later, she's like, what the heck? Its face isn't puffy, but the skin is like it's tighter. That's because the collagen on the inside plumped out like it should be at a younger age. And now we're repairing that, keeping it, and it holds a lot of water for, smoothness and thickness. That's one of the ways that it helps repair that collagen, or it helps keep the skin really smooth. In the hair, it actually makes your follicles bigger. So if this is a follicle, it gets bigger. That means the hair coming out is thicker. So when somebody says, oh my gosh, my hair's gotten so thick, it's a real thing, folks. The hair follicles actually get bigger in size, so you're making thicker individual hair strands, and it increases collagen follicle production. So that's why we're seeing people regrow their hair. They're actually, their body is making more follicles. The ones they have are bigger, wider, thicker. So now you get thicker hair. So dermatologists have put these in their lotions and creams and shampoos for years. And this was one of the things when I was thinking about writing the book. I said, somebody has to tell the story of all of the benefits from the research, not from testimonies. Testimonies are great, but from the research. Somebody needs to put it into a book, but then also tell, how do you get copper peptides? Well, you can get them in an IV. You can get them in an injection. You can go to a dermatologist and get it in lotions, creams, and shampoos. Or you can wear this little photobiomodulation patch, and it tells your body to make more of it. That's actually how I've transitioned since I've had the book to telling people about it. And it's what's really astounded me is that patients with whom I've already had a conversation about copper peptides prior to the book, copper peptides, the X39, they'll see my book on a stand in our waiting room. And they'll say, wow, you wrote a book? I say, yeah. What did you write about? It's the GHK-Copper peptide. And they look at me with a blank stare. What's that? Oh, remember that patch I told you about? That's the peptide that gets elevated in the bloodstream when you wear that patch. And they, really? Like it's the first time they heard it. It's really weird. It's like when it's because it's in a book, now they hear it, whereas when I told it to them, they might not have. And so that's my entire strategy when I'm introducing somebody to it is that I tell them about a few things in this about the research about this peptide, and this is how you can elevate it. And it actually simplified it. I don't really talk about stem cells anymore. I talk about the GHK elevate, excuse me, the patch elevating your GHK. Increasing your stem cells is one small part of what the GHK copper peptide can do. So you can tell your people, if you want to know what the potential benefits of wearing the patch is, all you have to do is look at the global research on what has been found by researchers all over the world, because the potential benefits of wearing the patch parallels what the research says the GHK copper peptide does, because LifeWave had a double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized study of blood tests, and they showed that the the X39, wearing the X39 patch elevates in the bloodstream the GHK copper peptide to significance. It was no small thing. This is what we need to talk about. How the X39 elevates that peptide in your bloodstream. So if you want to know what the patch can do, this is what it does. And if they have a specific thing that they want help, they wanting the patch to work for them, we don't tell them that, obviously. If they have a specific thing, you could take a picture of that chapter from the book and, well, here, read this. This is what the research shows. So that's how I've actually changed my approach with people. It's actually been very helpful. Okay, so the next aspect or benefit to the GHK copper peptide has to do with wound healing and wound healing, which increases collagen production, but then there's also collagen destruction. And what is that? Why would you want to destroy collagen? In the initial phases of wound healing, anciently, they think this peptide, we developed the ability to make this, or we were given this ability, whatever your beliefs are, the peptide is known as the emergency response peptide. So in an emergency, let's say that I'm in battle and I get this big old slash along my thigh. If things don't happen really quickly, I'm not going to make it. So the GHK signals your body, make more stem cells, because there's something going down. It's not good. You got, ketchup spill on aisle 13. Oh, sorry, that's blood. So we got a lot of bleeding going on. We have to stop it. We have to get circulation back into the other side of the arteries that were cut. We have to repair things really quickly. So when you think of why is it so quick to repair something, because it's the emergency response peptide. A little emergency response peptide on aisle 14. So your body gets the signal, all of a sudden, GHK copper peptide everywhere. Remember when I said it chemo attracts capillaries into the tissue? So now you got this rapid capillary infiltration. This is why we're seeing fingertips that surgeons refuse to sew back on, because they say it's going to die. And you'll see at Start 333 this site, you'll see a series of pictures, and there's a little fingertip of a 6-year-old. One of them, the fingertip is black. That's called necrosis. The fingertip died, rapidly got infiltrated by capillary growth, and they saved the fingertip. That's how wound healing happens so quickly in our body. Emergency response peptide, GHK-Copper peptide, rapid production of collagen for patching things up, rapid infiltration of capillary growth, rapid, perfusion of oxygen, nutrients to get out to that site, but also new neuron growth. You got to grow nerves in there. You have to have nerves everywhere. I got to repair those really quickly too. Let's patch it up. So let's say you got a bad cut, man. It's got a gnarly scar where your body's not really concerned about looking bad. The aesthetics of a scar. When it's haphazardly patching it back together. So after it's stopped and after it's healed and things start to really stabilize, this is where the destruction crew comes in. Collagen is like haphazard deposition of collagen. Just got to patch it. I'm not going to worry about this, how good it looks. But later, it comes in and breaks the cross linkages so that you're left with flexible scar. You're left with flexible tissue. And that's why we see these gnarly looking scars that have this big valley and it's all contracted in. Then over the month, they smooth out. And that has to do with that collagen destruction portion of rapid repair of collagen and rapid destruction that's not so rapid, but it is destruction of the collagen that's not needed anymore. It did its job. Now we got to smooth things out and make things look good, especially if it's on your face. So this is why plastic surgeons are using the patches. They're dependent upon referrals. So if somebody goes and very quickly it looks like they never even had a surgery and you can't see the scars, they're going to get a lot more referrals. So your plastic surgeons that you need to approach them from that point of view, that they get more referrals because their people don't even think. I mean, a lot of them don't even look like they had surgery. Very short time. All right, I'm judging to see how much time we have. I would like to take a couple of questions. We have only 10 minutes. Why don't we, if Judy, if you'll monitor the chat, if you could tell me, I'll keep an eye right now for any question that comes in. A few months ago, my hedge trimmer blade, that's just the saying how quickly something healed. But if anybody has any particular question about the GHK, how it affects a certain body part, organ, I'll answer it if I can. Let's see. No question yet.
Dr. Harmon, there was a really interesting question in the chat by Angela Cavalli Harris.
Okay.
Can I read it to you and you can maybe answer it?
Yeah, sure.
She says, as a cosmetologist, I was always taught that once the hair grows out of the scalp, the hair is dead, which is why it doesn't hurt to cut your hair. So why are my clients' hair who are using the patches, the hair color is changing from the root to the end in 3 to 4 weeks rather than just from the root?
I know, and I don't understand that either, because the hair outside of that follicle is dead. So there must be some kind of transport system, which doesn't make any sense. So I'll do a little research on that and find out why. My hair started turning from back to front. It was brown back here and gray on top, and I was like really gray. I should show everybody a picture. But that's what I'm thinking. I don't know for sure, but I'll find out. I do have a picture of my hair. Oops. See if there are any more questions in there, if you would.
Michelle has a question.
Okay, great.
My question, doctor, is that The way that I started using the X39 patch, a friend of mine, the Robinsons, they were giving me patches, and I had developed arthritis in a knee. And I would put them on. I didn't take them very seriously, but I started seeing an orthopedist who, once I started wearing the patches, I didn't know what he was doing. I'd just sit there and read my book, let him x-ray, do whatever, and then I would go home. Well, one day I showed up without the patches and he threw a literal fit. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? Where are those patches? He had nothing to do with the company. And he's like, he would ask me, like, what company is this? And what are these? He's like, why aren't you wearing them? And I'm like, well, they kind of pricey. He said, well, then you need to figure out how to afford them. Do you want me doing knee replacement surgery on you? Do you want me cutting on you? Those are helping you.
Wow.
I'm like,
Wow.
oh.
That says a lot.
Right. So at that point, I became a distributor so I could get them, like, a little,
gosh.
cheaper. That was what made me really get serious about it. So based on listening to, and I haven't had to see him again. I didn't. I just kept wearing them like he said, and didn't need to go back to see him anymore. But based on what you said, it sounds like it was the GHK peptide that was activated or something like that, and that caused it, because it really did get better.
Yeah.
And then we added the X49, and that really,
That's exactly what happened. We hear reports of that all over, and people write in about different things. And when I first started, if somebody would tell me a story like that, or like this nurse, she had to retire from nursing because she had MS. She was a nurse for 22 years, and she looks at me and says, yeah, after 5 days on the patches, I was doing wall squats and walking without my walker. And I looked at her like, you're telling me about a dream you had, because that can't be true. And so it's hard. Granted, it's difficult for a lot of healthcare providers to wrap their head around that, because we're used to the traditional, slow decline into aging and getting frail, and this is just the way it is. But that isn't the way that it has to be when you have this GHK-Copper peptide. I want to look and feel my best. And these patches, we all have a lifespan. There's some ratio of that, or some portion of that is our health span. Our health span is where we're still able to do things and think and remember who we are and travel, or if we can, and be healthy, and not this slow, relentless, I'm getting frail and then I die. Stay healthy, feel good, look and feel your best, and then die, if that's has to happen. But way, way, way down the road. And these patches help me with my goal of, I already mentioned, remembering who I am, not meeting a new person in my house every 15 minutes. And I'm the one who gets to travel to visit people rather than have them having to come to visit me, because I got too many things going on. I can't really go out of my house very much. And that type of life, that's not for me. Was there another question? I thought I saw something come in.
Susan, and then Suzanne.
How do we get your book?
One at a time, please.
I heard my name called.
Oh, sorry.
So I'm gonna go ahead and ask my question. Hey, Dr. Hammond, could you talk a little bit about eye health and how the GHK-Copper peptide can aid in maybe a healthy retina, or is that more glutathione? I would love to just learn a little bit more about that. Thank you.
I'm going to speak to the glutathione aspect of that. Now, first, know that when you use the GHK, remember, like, one of the things it does is elevates our stem cells. That's going to affect everything in our body. But in our body, everything is about moving charge. Every chemical reaction in our body is some process, either through digestion, and then we get it down into the smallest particles, and then we get electrons from it. We have to do that. Oxidation, antioxidation is movement of electrons. Everything we do has to do with that. And glutathione, I call it the protector of the realm, because it donates electrons where they've been stolen. So when we go out in the sun, we have the ionizing rays of the sun. Ionizing means when it hits you, it kicks out an electron from somewhere. It creates an ion. It creates oxidative stress when we lose electrons. Our cornea, our lens, all of the tissues, including the lens and the eye, are designed to absorb the ionizing rays of the sun so they don't get to your retina, because then you'll go blind. So, not so coincidentally, the cornea, the retina, the lens have high amounts of glutathione in them. But when the ionizing rays of the sun come in and they kick out an electron in your lens, glutathione goes, here's some electrons. Here you go. It's the protector of the realm. It's like a self-healing shield when you're playing a video game, you know, you're a robot, you get a chink in your armor and then it just self-heals. That's what glutathione does to those tissues. It makes it so there's not such a big effect. This is why when we were in Aruba for the incentive trip, David Schmidt gave everybody a whole sleeve of glutathione to use if we're going to be out in the sun, because it helps shield against the ionizing rays, and the skin responds a lot better, and we didn't get burned. And we don't make claims about that, but doctors will say, well, sunlight causes cataracts. Well, my question is, does it? Or is it a lack of glutathione? Now, to get ample glutathione, you need to eat sulfur-rich foods, broccoli, cauliflower, okra, eggs. You need to eat things with sulfur in them because your body has to have sulfur to make glutathione. Now, there's not enough time to talk specifically about the GHK, but everything applies that I already talked about. Stem cell activation, collagen repair, maintenance of everything is dependent upon that. But you have to have an ample supply of glutathione. Nutrition companies brag if they are able to raise your glutathione 10% by taking a glutathione supplement. The glutathione patch raises glutathione levels in the bloodstream, as shown in blood tests, on average 300% within 24 hours. The highest was 460%. So it's a big deal. The level of glutathione in your cells is directly related to your lifespan. That's a big deal. So it's been really fun. I hope from this presentation, you gained a deeper conviction of what you're doing and more courage to go out and know that you are helping that person. If they will listen, you are making huge changes in their life, their lifespan. And you, each and every one of you, you are increasing your circle of influence for good, potentially globally. You will have people in foreign lands who find out about these patches because you told one person who told another, who told another, who knows somebody in Estonia whose little boy's fingertip was cut off. And because you told somebody here, that little boy's finger doesn't fall off, that he's ended up without a finger. If that doesn't float your boat, I don't know what will, but that's the kind of change you can create globally with your unemotionally introducing somebody to help them live or extend out their health span, and also to help others. Thanks for coming this week. Next week, same time for the team training. We got Thanksgiving coming up. You got a lot of exposure to new people or people you haven't seen in a long time. Ask them about their health. and see if there's some way that you can help them deal with that and help their body be the best it can be so they don't need medicines and surgeries later on in life.